intended this morning to speak to all of you about stewardship, about giving, generosity. But yesterday, as I was sitting in prayer at my desk, scrolling through the news from Paris, I realized that this is a moment when we as Quakers should talk about peace. That in response to these sorts of acts of violence, we should respond by once again testifying to the power of peace. So many of you, I'm assuming, have heard the news from Paris, the terrorist attacks that have claimed over 100 lives. And this news is tragic, and it's horrifying, and it's also familiar. I don't know about you, but I feel like I hear news like this fairly often. Like every time I open a newspaper or turn on the news, I hear of another act of violence. Terrorist groups bombing communities in the Middle East. Terrorist attacks in Africa. Civilians killed by government-sanctioned acts of violence, war, destruction, gun violence on the streets. The attacks in Paris are terrible. They are horrifying and they are tragic, but they're only the most public and most recent example of violence in our world. Only the most recent chapter in a story that's been going on forever. I think that George Fox's words about there being an ocean of darkness have never felt so true. Our world seems swamped, consumed with terror, with hate, and with fear. The story is the same, again and again and again and again. And it's in moments like these that I cling to passages like the one that I read you this morning from the book of Matthew, passages about peace. In part because as the world responds to Paris, I think we will see an increase in violence, retaliation, more acts of terror, which will in turn create another cycle of violence and retaliation. We all know this story. We're all familiar with this pattern. We've seen it again and again. And as a people who have dedicated ourselves to peace, it's in moments like this when we see violence spark another cycle of terror and violence. It's in moments like these when we can feel the most hopeless. I don't know about you, but sometimes I feel as if peace will never be possible. As if turning the other cheek is hopelessly naive. When I feel this sense of hopelessness, which perhaps some of you feel a similar sense, I try to turn again to the Spirit. I turn again to silence, to those moments when I can listen for the still, small voice. I also turn again to the sources of wisdom in my life, to Scripture for me, and to the writings of our Quaker forebears, like the one that I quoted to you this morning. I listen for the still, small voice, speaking through those words and speaking in the silence. And the question that I always bring to God as I struggle in these moments, I always ask God, what can I say and what can I do? We do utterly deny all outward wars and strife and fighting with outward weapons for any end or under any pretense whatsoever. And this is our testimony to the world. If this is our testimony, friends, then now is the time for us to testify. Let us testify to the world. Let us do it in such a way that we do not dismiss the pain and the righteous anger of those who are suffering. Let us testify, but let us do so without dismissing the fact that war is supported by a massive structure of money and power. Let us testify, but let us do so acknowledging the fact that when we speak of peace, we are speaking of something that may seem ridiculous, naive, impossible, and perhaps foolish. Let us testify with love to the power of that emotion. Let us testify with compassion to the power and possibility of transformation. And let us testify that the God that we believe in is a God of the impossible, a spirit that can transform water into wine and death into life, a spirit that is an infinite ocean of light and love, an ocean that is much greater than the ocean of darkness that fills our world. Let us testify to the fact that our spirit, the spirit that we hold among us, the spirit that guides us, the spirit that we believe in, is a spirit of transformation. A spirit that makes a way when there is no way, a way in the wilderness. A spirit of the impossible and the foolish and the naive and the ridiculous. Let us testify in this moment of darkness, when the world seems like a storm of violence and hate. Let us stand in that storm and let us testify to the stillness and calm of peace. We may speak with just a small, small voice, but let us speak. Let us testify, and to paraphrase St. Francis, let us do it with words if we must. Let us testify to the impossible, to the transformative, to the unlikely. Friends, let us take this tension and this pain, this sorrow, our care and compassion. Let us take it into our time of silence. As a good Quaker, that is often my response. If I do not have the words, if I do not know what to do or what to say, then I listen. Let us listen together, friends. And let us hold in the light those in Paris and throughout this world who are experiencing sorrow, suffering, tragedy, and violence.